Howdy, and welcome to 522's Shift Happens, where we discuss the latest and greatest in video innovation. Government video. It has a little bit of a stigma for not being interesting, but there are a lot of reasons why that can and should and will change. And 522 is one of those reasons, ideally. I'm here with co-founder and CEO Alisa Vossen to discuss how government can level up its creativity in video. Alisa, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you have been here at 522 since the inception. Throughout the entire time, you guys have worked with government a lot. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how government was at the beginning and then really get into how government has changed and how it could change more. So tell me how government was at the beginning, how working with government was in the beginning.
Well, that's a loaded question, but I think in the beginning when we started working with the government, it was really tough to get into different contracts and campaigns and being able to diversify within the different agencies. But we were able to start working on our GSA contract pretty early on and had a steady consistency with different contracts. I would say in the beginning, it was very one to one. It was like, here's one project, here's one contract, here's one video that we would work on. And one video per year or one video every 6 months was acceptable for the government back then. In fact, it
Hmm.
was acceptable for everybody within the community of marketing and branding and communications. Because at that point, video was very expensive and
Right.
most budgets can only handle one video at a time as we've progressed over the last decade and so. And I would say even post COVID, the amount of content that's out onto the media platforms and distribution between social media, that one video is clearly not enough. The mass amount of content that's being produced today is an insane amount that is just an overflow and overabundancy and overwhelming amount of content that people are being kind of introduced to and put into their media channels for them to decide on. So I would say over the last few years, we've seen an influx in the contracts and the contracting. And it's also been a lot of mergers and teaming with marketing agencies that are also working in the government space. But coming out of post COVID, I think a lot of agencies are now realizing just how much video content they actually need in order to compete in the NGO world, in the private sector. And so government is now beefing up all of
Right.
its communications in order to meet the same level, which, I don't know if anybody's going to ever meet that level because, people are producing content at like rapid speed, but
Extravagant rates.
it really is. And, there's a fine line between content for content and there's this other world where it's content for story and content for brands and making sure that you're leveling up the value of your brand. And so I believe the government is now seeing this and starting to react a little bit,
Hmm.
not at the same capacity of producing content, but being able to be relevant and staying in front of their audience that they need to be in front of, but they're going to need to start producing a lot more content.
No, absolutely. You bring up a lot of of course, salient points, which is that there's so much out there that is out for everybody's attention. And the government is, just as anyone else vying for people's attention. We work on a lot of different government videos. Could you tell me a couple examples of reasons the government wants video, like things that we're trying to get people's attention, government wise, the kinds of stuff that we work on.
I would say, we've been working on a lot of agency recruiting campaigns. We've
Hmm.
been working on a lot of brand campaigns, and we've been working on a lot of training. So there's quite a few sectors that we're working on, and I think the biggest challenge right now for the government, at least in the contracts that we're seeing, is introducing maybe complex training programs or complex programs within the government that really need to have that human and personal feel. No longer can you go into a training for a 4-hour training and expect the staff of the government to like have this stick. So they're trying new, refreshed ideas to be able to work within that sector. And they're not in the office anymore. So
Oh, yeah.
there's this contingency where, there's this open work policy, right? Telework is happening. So if they're not having full staff meetings and they're able to kind of save people's time for not being in the office, then they're turning all of these trainings and educational courses and curriculum that they need to articulate to their staff into video content.
Right.
But in order for somebody to sit in front of a computer and want to watch something for 20, 30 minutes, it needs to be awesome. It needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be informative, and it
Right.
needs to get the message across where somebody really wanted to be and interact with that mission. So there is a big challenge there. I think another big challenge the government is facing is recruiting.
Mhm.
Recruiting requires being relevant in front of the audience that you're trying to obtain. And as we have an aging workforce, right, we need to be replacing this workforce with new, younger professional talent.
Mhm.
And so when a young professional has the choice to work for a government agency or work for a private sector,
Ugh.
and they have choices that they can make, how do we present in recruiting campaigns the high value benefits that the government can provide in different agencies? May
Right.
not be salary, it may not be PTO or whatever, but there are some really beneficial high value values that the government can present to the workforce that
Mhm.
people just don't know about, right? They just are
Right.
not informed about it. And again, post COVID, there's only so many career fairs that you're going to, there's so many events that you can go to. So if you can produce visual content to
Mhm.
help inform the audience faster in their search, then you're getting ahead of their thinking and you're getting ahead of the applications, and you're being able to attract the right talent for the agency specifically that you're looking for.
Mhm. No, absolutely. I mean, you make a lot of, salient points, right? Especially like with training videos. I think a great example is recently, without sort of getting into the nitty gritty, we're working on a lot of training videos now, a lot of stuff. And we've worked with training videos in the past. And I think as of recently, I remember there's a project that we were working on where we decided to kind of push the envelope in a way that I think our partners did not expect, our client did not expect. And I think that ended up working really interesting. They ended up really liking it, actually. They were kind of almost, I don't want to say like the word is uncomfortable, but they definitely like, this was definitely like not what they were expecting and not
Yeah.
what they came out with. But what they realized is that they found the video very engaging and interesting. And I think that's like, with that, that's kind of the value that like sort of creative agencies like us sort of provide, which is bringing that sort of outside of the usual government box sort of thinking, that you a lot of times, can, not be provided by, internal teams, mostly from, I would say, like, overworking, because there's definitely so much that, like you said, that they have to keep up with now. But I think we provide a lot of value in that respect, right? Absolutely. Would you agree with that, I guess?
Oh, 100%. And I would also like to add that, most of the government agencies have internal video teams, marketing teams, communications teams that have expertise within that agency with from marketing and positioning, maybe
Mhm.
like the focus groups, different recruitment aspects. And
Yeah.
where we benefit becoming a high benefit for the government agency is that we do bring an outside perspective that gives them the power to actually create content that is like I said, more relevant, but at the same time more fresh and fun.
Mhm.
I think anybody who listens to this who works in the government space would also resonate that some boundaries within the government, maybe
Mhm.
policies, or there's different perspectives. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. And so
Right.
being able to have a team, a trusted team of professionals who work specifically in one space that can come in and provide, you know, strategic advice and strategic execution to the government allows them to be that much better at what they want to do. And it gives them that next level up that they didn't know that they can actually get until they've actually were able to consult with other team members to do it. But I think it also is very cool to be working with their internal teams to help,
Mhm.
with the different creative strategies. They have ins and outs of like where we need to film or who we can film.
Mhm.
They're able to collect staff members for us to be part of shots, which is really fun.
Right.
And I would say back to the project that you were alluding to, it was a training video.
Right.
And during the rough cut, the coolest thing that they said was, you know, they thought the video was actually too fun, and they questioned whether or not it was changing the validation of how important the training was. But, from our perspective, if it was not fun, then they might as well just read the document, or they should just, go through the PowerPoint presentation. But if you
Right.
really want them to
Mhm.
connect on a personal level and see that this training and this policy and the legalized version of this training is a human, it's human. And you
Right.
want it to be human so that people actually want to feel engaged in the training and actually will take action. And so they did an internal focus group. They went through it, and some folks had the same feelings that it was too fun, but at the end they were like, we need this to be different. We need this to challenge the status quo of what we normally do so that we can collectively bring the masses together and
Mhm.
have a more powerful agency.
Yeah, absolutely. Within that sort of space, like, I found that, like, we had a lot of good support there. I think that they thought it was a little fun, but they also what they realized is that, like you said, the opposite version of that is a little too serious. It's hard to watch something that gets too like, for 20 minutes is, like, very
Yeah.
serious, very focused, and these training videos were pretty long, and they had a lot of information to cover, and if we took it the serious route, I think, it would be very easy for people to be very checked out while watching it. And what I found personally is that even though I was the one editing it, I was watching it over and over, and I still found it engaging. Like,
Yeah.
when I was watching them over, I'd be like, "Yeah, you know what? This is I can follow this. Like, I've
Yeah.
learned information in a way that I would not have picked up on before, otherwise." And, like, shout out to, the creative directors, on this, Jordan, and then also, Chad, who, worked together, with me and with all of our producers here. You were on this project as well, and so was, our, producer, Kara, like, all working together to come up with this very creative stuff, working with, the agency in mind, to, like, work, and make something really cool, and their internal team was great, as well.
And they had a great experience, and that's the only thing that we really ultimately care about is they get the product that matters. They get the
Mhm.
product that's going to work, and the products that we delivered will give them longevity. So while the investment is in, let's say, this fiscal year, right? The investment will carry on for the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, and therefore it makes the collaboration that much more important to be able to work with external small businesses who have the very specific niche like we do in video marketing, in order to give them, the ultimate goal is to like make, everything you do should make you better the next day that you do something, or
Absolutely.
that's terrible. I didn't get that saying correctly, so you'll have to edit
I get
that
what you were
out.
going for. Yeah.
Thank God this isn't live. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, yeah,
everything
yeah.
what you did yesterday is supposed to make you better tomorrow, or whatever the saying is.
Exactly, yeah.
Chad's rolling his eyes.
Um, I think no, you, make a lot yeah, I understand what you're getting at for sure, and, like, along with that, in terms of things that they're doing to, like, get better, what I've also noticed as I've been working in, video, and hopefully you've been also noticed this as well, is that, we've been working on a lot more social stuff for government as well. Obviously, there's the training videos and the recruitment stuff, but there's also just, like, social things to, like, get people, like, interested in the agencies as a whole. We've done something recently, just, a couple of things have released recently for, NIMH. They, released their anniversary video, and that we worked on, and, like, that was a very fun, very social video, that was great. We're working on with the a training, video with the agency, we made a trailer, something that you I believe we talked about this earlier,
Mm.
just, before, recording, that you had wrote that in there, actually. It's got the in there, and, like, what do you think is the value of, like, the government reaching out in a social media space?
I would say my perspective is that the government has to reach out in the social media space. I
Okay.
think they have to start being positioning themselves like on LinkedIn. I think they're going to have to start kind of competing in terms of the world of being known in social media, because a lot of, in recruitment, right? Let's say the younger audience, they're checking, that's where they're getting their news feeds from. So if you're not um, being on a platform where you're trying to target your audience, or you're trying to recruit your next workforce, then you're not going to validate you as an agency in terms of that
Mhm.
respect. So, in terms of the government in the past, I would say, didn't have to compete against private sector, but they have to compete against private sector now. And so
Right.
I think that goes down to mission, culture, brand, everything that their core values, the services that they provide, and the sectors of public service that they actually, manage. There are some agencies that, have a lot of budget allocated to this type of kind of distribution, and there's some agencies that just don't have that
Mhm.
budget. And so being able to work across small to extremely large agencies within the playing field gives us that experience where we can offer clients elements of video marketing or marketing itself that they didn't know they needed,
Right.
right? And so every RFP that I respond to or every contract that comes through my email, a question I always ask within the Q&A portion of it is, do you need social media content? And the responses that I get are, I don't know, or we haven't thought about it yet, or uh, yes, but, is it 15? Is it 6 seconds? Like, what's it, 45 seconds? And so
Right.
oftentimes in the early on process, the distribution hasn't been worked out in terms of the content. So we're thinking ahead, anticipating what this agency might need based on what we can find from research and what they're doing currently in order for give them content that's actually going to be more impactful than they ever thought it was, especially from an RFP process. So,
Mhm.
um, to not have social media of any capacity, I think is a miss. And
Right.
so, I also believe that if we can do it easily and not have it to be a part of effective cost, we might as well give the government as much content as possible because if they are our biggest employer, then they should have the benefit of the same value as private sector.
I think back for a moment to talking about the competition, because you're right that, like, government in all these spaces, in the social media space, is competing against the private sector, and that's, like, challenging 'cause it's like we've talked about, there's a lot more high-paying jobs in the private sector.
It's
Like, how do you
constantly moving, so
Yeah.
it's really hard to keep pace with, private sector.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's difficult. I think that part of the challenge there is that, with government stuff, it's hard to, like, keep pace in internal sense. There's just a lot going on. Those teams are very small, and so I think that's why outsourcing. I hope you agree. Is like outsourcing to us, like agencies like us, is like valued because like we can keep up a lot easier than like the government agencies can with like every new thing that's happening. If they outsource to people like us, we can be like, yeah, no, this is the type of video that you want to make right now
yeah.
because this is where we're at.
Yeah, and I think that's, part of, uh, collaborating with an external resource, like 522. Um, we have a different perspective, an outsider's perspective in order to help them keep up.
Hmm.
Now, whether or not they're able to do that within budget or within scope, but some agencies have the ability to do like yearly campaigns ahead of time so that they have fresh content coming, and others don't. So when
Right.
we do go into a contract, let's say that's maybe new for this agency, or maybe this is the first time they've ever done a big PR marketing campaign. I actually find that actually way more exciting because now we have the abilities to kind of break barriers a little bit and think
Hmm.
outside the box. And this is where the
Right.
creative team comes in and has the ideas of like, what if we tried this? What if we did this? Like I've seen this happen.
Hmm.
We have a little bit more wiggle room to be um, bring that agency to the next level, which is actually really cool. And it gives them even more content at the end. So we're always thinking content library. We're always, in the
Hmm.
drives that we hand over to the government, it's always like there's way more content on there that they'll ever know what to do with. But guess what? They have content for the next 2 years. And so whether or
Hmm.
not they have the ability to take advantage of it is a different perspective, but or a different, like, statement, I should say, but I hope they do because, like,
Yeah.
that's the whole ultimate goal is to constantly be sending out messaging, in a timely fashion that allows the agency to keep their brand, their mission, their values,
Right.
and their core benefits, at the top of everybody's, like, initial scroll, or if they're looking on different platforms for, applications for jobs, even presenting stuff on, USA Jobs or whatever is really something all government agencies should be doing if they can.
Mhm. No, absolutely. I mean, the content libraries thing is so huge. I mean, a good example is like one of our major clients is Architect of the Capitol. And we've built a huge like library of video and content with them where like I can, if I'm like, I need, oh, darn, I wish I had this shot for this video, I can go in like through our library and I might just be able to find the shot that I'm looking for because we have so much that we've collected from them that they've given us that we've done for them. There's so much there, and I think there's a lot of value in especially the like a long relationship that a
Yeah,
government agency can have with like an external company like 522 can bring a lot of value to them.
agreed. I think the one if I could change one thing in terms of, like, contracting with the government is
Yeah,
that it's very isolated to that one task, that one project, unless
right.
there was, like, a BPA that we can work on, or if there's different ways to structure the different contracts, especially in this world, is because, um speaking of, like, Architect of the Capitol, we're doing interactive video now, and we created this really cool test video, and we're like, "Too bad we can't send this to the government." We can, right? But what are they gonna do with it? Because it's not
Yeah,
part of a contract, right? So,
right,
having those long-term relationships allows us to even be more of a partner,
right.
in that creative aspect where they can lean on us as, like, an extension of their team, and then our team is their team, and we're able to work with. And there's a lot of these contracts in place for, let's say, staffing, program officers, or cybersecurity defense has a lot of these, like,
Mhm,
year-over-year contracts, but there's very limited ones for the video marketing and marketing space, right? And so
mhm,
there is for marketing, and that's where teaming agreements have come into play. A lot is to allow us to have an external resource in the communication. So if we're able to produce content on a monthly basis um, for the government, then they're able to make better traction in the goals that they want for their year.
in terms of smaller agencies, there's a lot of like you mentioned previously like small agencies that don't really have a lot of budget. Do you think there's a lot of there is value in like having them like, right now as we're recording, like we're a couple months out from the end of the government budget cycle or like yeah, annual cycle. And so like they'll get new budgets, they'll have to, reframe their way of doing things for the next fiscal year. Do you think there's value in them setting aside whatever like, every scrapping penny that they can to, like, start building, like, a video library, even those smaller agencies?
I don't know if
Mm,
I don't think it would be valuable for them to do it
mhm,
in that capacity, but I think it would be more valuable for them to turn maybe contracts of our nature or even in the marketing space, turn it into,
okay.
a 1 year with 4-year options or a blanketed purchase order agreement. Because oftentimes, we had a contract that was really great where it was like, here was this one project. But then let's do an open task order so that we can actually have other smaller projects that we can go through and then utilize your team when we need the highest expertise to come in. Or if our internal team gets backlogged, we
Mhm,
can bring you guys in at an easier capacity versus
okay.
trying to do open bidded season. And so, if we're able to merge some of these contracts out there, and there's all kinds of IDIQ, there's the Oasis, there's different types of vehicles that we can use within it. But I do encourage the government agencies to maybe think about video content, especially interactive, in a little bit of a different capacity and challenge them to write different contracts that
Mhm,
don't look like yesteryear's contracts because
right.
it's their need we can anticipate is going to be way more greater in the coming years than it ever was before. And so for them to think outside the box on how they can procure these types of contracts might be super beneficial for them. And
Right.
it actually is super beneficial for us as small businesses in our collaboration with the government, because then we can provide a different level of service to them versus like, here's your one video, good luck
Mhm,
with it. Whereas if we had a different contract, we could assist them in distribution. We can assist them in, who's seeing it. We can
mhm,
beta test it. We can watch, the viewership on against whether YouTube or Vimeo, and we can help them um, really kind of extend basically the effort that we're putting forward.
So you mentioned a second ago, Elisa, like or you were just talking about the future potential of ways of government to sort of expand on doing better with video. But I'd love to. What do you think are the current limitations that the government is seeing with their online video space? Right, without obviously dogging on the government, but like telling like what are the weaknesses that they currently have, like without using external agencies, and what are the weaknesses that we're currently finding, even like sort of the struggles that we're facing headlong that the government could improve on.
I don't know if it's potential, challenges or barriers, or I think it's just the nature of the processes within the government that creates, they definitely a lot of the agencies have marketing firms. I know there's definitely a lot of, perspective in what the content should be that's being developed. I think it takes a lot of effort and time and research to sort of develop content that is going to be relevant, but I think the biggest challenge the government has is the time it takes, and the levels of clearance that it needs to go through. So,
Mhm.
in private sector, we have luxuries where we can just kind of beta test stuff pretty quickly, and within the government, they don't have those luxuries. So, I
Right.
think a big challenge is for them to stay relevant in a space that's evolving so fast, but
Mhm.
their policies and their procedures kind of hinder that kind of capacity. So, while I don't believe the government will ever be able to change, processes and policies, nor should they, to meet this today's world, but I think if they are trying to compete within the private sector space, then I think there's got to be some adaptation to make in order for like them to be able to market to the audience or market, in a way that
Mhm.
they need to. So, and I think a lot of agencies that work in the government definitely feel the same challenges where, contracts that we're working on today, one within the health and human services agencies, one of their agencies is that we're creating content today for a year from now. And
Right.
hopefully that because that's the amount of time we need in order to get through clearance, amount of time that we need to prep it, the amount of research that needs to be happen. And hopefully by the time we get to that content in launch days, getting that content to launch, I should say, I hope it's still relevant, but those are going to be some of the challenges that they're going to face. If we did our job properly and we did it well enough, then the content that we've created has longevity. So it's just the messaging that needs to change. And the
Mhm.
visual medium is still just as powerful as it is today as it will be like in 2024.
No, okay, yeah, I can see that, what you're outlining there, definitely in my own experiences, that sort of feeling of being a little slow. In that vein, so we work with a lot of times, we have a lot of times where we work just directly, with government agencies, but there are times where we end up being sort of the surrogate, where we do the sort of creative video stuff and we're working with an agency, like a private sector agency that is working thereby with the government. Do you find how do you find that relationship to be versus us working directly with the governments? Like, what do you feel about how about that?
I honestly think we've had a lot of great relationships with digital marketing agencies, especially our 8A agencies.
Mhm.
We've tend to be very respectful of each other's expertise, and we
Mhm.
actually go after contracts knowing that we're going to be a collaborative team,
Mhm.
where we each hold, our very expert niche in within that, SOW requirement from the government. And it's actually a really great benefit to the government to be able to say, it's an open contract so that we can bring in different resources when we need to bring them in based on
Mhm.
what they need. And so I think it's actually a really great opportunity to provide more in the government space if we have open teaming agreements that allow us to subcontract it. And oftentimes the contracts that are being written are this like wide, we need marketing and PR help, and here's a
Mhm.
litany of things that you need to do between graphic designs and social media and SEO and uh, sell sheets or flyers and video. And so everything's lumped into this one big, contract. And so for the prime, it's nice to be able to pluck resources to bring it together. And we have many teaming agreements with small 8As. And for that, because they're breaking through the weeds of the government contracting, so are we, and it's really nice to have, um, really smart, intelligent people to work with, and we're being able to, like, kind of very strategically help government agencies with those
Hell yeah.
challenges that they face.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. I guess one final thing is that, like, what really final note do you think, like, if there's something that, like, let's say that there's a current uh marketing person working for a government agency right now that's listening to this and needs to take away a major thing, what is the most important thing to take away, or at least a couple of really important things to take away from this podcast, from what you want to communicate?
It's a really great question. One that I did not prep for, just kidding. Um, I would say maybe a few key takeaways that if you're listening to this and you're looking to level up your agency's creative, like let us be creative.
Hmm.
Let us give us the ability, a little bit of leeway to unleash the krakens and bring in different creative styles because you know sometimes there's a little bit of hindrance in terms of like perspectives. Again, what you don't know in the government agency, but
Yeah.
if we're able to show you the depth and the breadth of creative that you can bring to your agency that would level up your brand and make your brand that much more sophisticated, we would that would be the opportunity for us to do that. And I would also say that there's not enough content in this world to meet the needs of what distribution looks like right now. And if there's an ability for us to just work with the agency to give you different content, I would definitely encourage those who want it and those who have never done video that know that they've been tasked with a video. I
Hmm.
would say the biggest key takeaway is to find somebody that you trust and also just want to have fun with because it is a little bit of a long process, but you're kind of working together, and so you definitely want to have a group of fun people who are experts,
Hell yeah.
that are willing to like you know go on this journey with you. And those who really want to work with the government agency, which companies really want to work in the government, and those who really don't.
It's us. It's us. You should work
Ouch.
with us. Well, Elisa, thank you for talking with me here today about government stuff. This has been a interesting conversation. I've learned a lot that I didn't really understand before, and I've definitely, I think, come to a greater understanding of the important work we do and the value that video brings to sort of government agencies.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
a whole nother level to this.
yeah.
And from a creative's perspective, right? You you just want to like do your best work, and
Hmm.
the potential of the
Hell
best
yeah.
work that you can do if you can just jump get over a few hurdles. And if we are given the opportunity to present this sophisticated fresh creative that we have and all these amazing ideas that you, Ahmed, have,
Yeah.
to the government, like it would blow their minds. It would be like a whole nother level of creativity they never thought was going to do. And to be honest, they don't get to do this stuff most often, those that are
Hmm.
working in the government space, and so, this is like these are the fun projects they get to
Yeah.
work on, and that's
So
why it
exciting.
makes it that much more rewarding to work with folks.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting. And I hope that people keep working with us and then we see a lot more excitement coming from that government space. Well, that's going to be it for us here at Shift Happens. Be sure to check out our sort of tie in blog and newsletter at the 522 website. We'll have links in our description. Thank you again, Alisa, for being here. And that's 522's Shift Happens, signing off.